Welcome to the Random Review. I'm your host, Aseta Ubaka. Today we are joined by a special guest from Malawi Congress Party. Our guest today is Haid Miawa, the region treasurer from southern region of Malawi. He will be explaining the history of MCP. Stay tuned. You are welcome. Can you explain a little bit about the history of Malawi Congress Party?
Party is driven from the early days of His Excellency the late Ngwazi Dr. Hastings Kamuzubanda. Ngwazi Dr. Kamuzubanda left Malawi, then Nyasaland, in all those old days, possibly in the early 30s, for UK through South Africa. At first he went to Zimbabwe, from there he went to South Africa, from there he went to America, where he had his early education, and UK. Now, while there, he developed a sense of political affiliations in him. Those days we had a few African leaders like Jomo Kenyatta, who was his friend from Kenya. We had Abu Bakar Tafawa Balewa of Nigeria, and all those old leaders, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, and at the time there were other young leaders at the time, like Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, who was at the time he was a bit younger than the ones I have mentioned. Now, these people, they developed a sense of trying to liberate the African continent, that we should also become what do we call them? We should become self-governed, so that we could be we should have our own mandate of ruling African countries. So this syndrome, I've forgotten Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. He was the champion of this battle, you see, among his statesmen that I've mentioned here. So as they were debating, discussing, they developed a sense of trying to colonize Africa from the British or French rule, from whatever. That was the born of what we call change of wind. They were trying to change the state of how they understood the problems then. Because don't forget, after a partition of Africa, now here I'm talking of when these colonial rulers divided Africa. That is when we call partition of Africa. After they did that, they were doing that against the African demands. It was they themselves as the colonialists to divide or to share up the continent, which they managed to do. But as they were managing Africa, time was changing, and Africa itself was also developing. And since Africa was also developing, there were some leaders now who felt it was now time for them to rule for themselves. Hence why this new born of Africa era from those colonialists. That's how it started. So each reader had to sensitize his African people from where he was coming from. Like say Kwame Nkrumah, he had to sensitize the Ghanaians so that, Ghana could become independent. Tafawa Balewa, Nigeria, Jomo Kenyatta, Kenya, Julius Nyerere, Tanzania. Anyway, Zimbabwe, it was at a later period because the leader there was still junior to these other leaders. Now, Kamuzu felt that was also time for Nyasaland to come out of the colonial rule. So what did he do? Don't forget, or you will be told that Nyasaland was bound together with two other countries, Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, and Nyasaland. This is why there was what you hear nowadays, that there was Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. Luckily enough, all these three countries were under the British rule. You see? So it was easy to negotiate with the British so that, Nyasaland could become independent, Northern Rhodesia could become independent. Northern Rhodesia, there was Kenneth Kaunda. He was also an old statesman who led Zambia as, from the colonial point. So when in the early 40s, 43, 48, 49, Dr. Banda, our president, our former president, was very instrumental among his other leaders, because he himself was a doctor in UK at the time. So these other leaders found advantage on him because one, he was they are a physician, they are a doctor. Some were going to him for treatment and all that. And due to that, they were negotiating and discussing whatever to do in Africa. So that made him to be on the center point of trying to coordinate with the other African leaders. That was the time. So during those old days, this country was being managed by chiefs. You know that chiefs have been in this country for long, right? But most of them were not educated anyway. But Dr. Banda used to use those chiefs, up to the point that he was calling some of them to go to UK. He was trying to sensitize this idea that as they came back, they could tell other African leaders or other people in Africa or in Malawi, in Nyasaland at that time. Now, on top of those chiefs, there were few other people who were educated then. They also followed the the same trap, like the Manoa Chirwa. You hear people of Manoa Chirwa. There was somebody who was C.C. Chinula, Charles Chinula. There were people like Sangara. there were old people of such caliber those days. They were also canvassing to people around Nyasrande to say, no, we have to get our own self-government. And this picture had entered in the minds of people. And there were some people who were really learned people, educated people, like the Otto Nchirwa you are talking about, because the name of Malawi Congress Party came from Otto Nchirwa. He's the one who named that name of Malawi Congress Party. That was when Dr. Banda was in Guel, but that was now in 1959. From April 1959 to from March 1959 to April 1960. After a year's period in prison, Dr. Banda, when he came back to Malawi now, the one who was running the party here was Otto Nchirwa. We had the other people as well, like Henry Masauko Chipembere, the Bwana Usizi, Wile Chokani, all these people, Kanyama Chiume, all these people, they teamed up and they were working or preaching the gospel of getting this country from the hands of white people. Why? Because Dr. Banda came into Malawi on 6th July 1958. When he came in, he told people why he came into Malawi. He said he had come to do 2 or 3 things: to break their stupid federation, to get their self-government, and to act as a bridge between races. To act as a bridge between races meant that he was not going to say, this is a white man, I don't want him, this is an Indian, but himself had come in order to unite the races, to get our freedom, to get our independence, and be staying in harmony, as a bridge between the races, So he did that, and he toured the whole country. That was between 58 and 59. And within 1 year, this country was on fire politically. That is when they had now arrested him.
How does the MCP foster leadership development, particularly among youth people, to prepare them for key positions?
It is doing very well. That is why you can see, even during our ended up convention, most of the young ones have acquired the senior positions. If I can give you an example, even the secretary, our current Secretary General, he's a youth. He was Director of Youth. He is now the Secretary General of the party. Well, the Treasurer General, my own boss, he's just a youth. He's a youngster. You see? Or the Director of Youth, whatever. He's also a youth, right? Most of these positions are held up by the youth. I will even tell you of senior position, very senior positions. See our first Vice President, Gotani Hara. He's a youth. He's a youth. He's academic from Kamuzu Academy. Kamuzu Academy was introduced in 1981. So you can see, before